we're continuing on our series on David called The Imperfect King. David and Goliath, as I said before, are one of the most famous stories in the Bible. If you grew up in a church, even if you're in the church for a year or two, you have heard this story. But if you grew up in church, you have heard this many, many times. From a very young age, my children would have heard this many times in Sunday school. Their teachers would have taught them about David and Goliath. So that's what we're going to look at. It's a famous story, yet somehow this passage has been misapplied many times as well, unfortunately, just as many times as it has been preached. If you've been around church, you heard that people say when they talk about this passage, it's like, be like David, kill your Goliath, right? So you are David, and then everyone has Goliath, have a giant enemies in their life, whatever that is. So they name every single thing Goliath in their life. They name, you have depression, that's your Goliath. You are David, you can kill your depression. If you have financial problem, they said, your financial problem, that's your Goliath. You can kill your Goliath. You are David, that's what they say. But I'm going to tell you, that's not the message. Okay? So if that's how you've been taught, and that's how you've heard the story, unfortunately, I will have to tell you that's not the message of this passage for us. We are not David, and we are not here to face all giants and kill our Goliath, whatever that may be. So what is it about then? So last week, before we go further, last week we look at how David was anointed by God through the prophet Samuel. Remember that? David's father, Jesse, paraded all 7 brothers and forgotten David, the 8th son, who was out in the field, left out in the field looking after the animals, the sheep. Yet David was the one that God anointed. And this is what happened in verse 16, in chapter 16, verse 13 that we read last time. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed David in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon David from that day forward. So David was still a youth, still young, not yet a king, anointed to be a king. But the Lord, the Word of God says, the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon David from that day forward. And Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. So David didn't become king immediately, but he was anointed to be king. But what happened then when he was anointed, the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon David and rest on David. That's what happened. So what is this idea of the Spirit of the Lord resting upon someone? This is not a new concept in the Bible. It has happened throughout the Bible, right? So in Exodus, as the people went out from Egypt, from the slavery of Egypt, when they built the tabernacle, it says that the Spirit of God filled Bezalel, the son of Uri, in Exodus 35. Why? To give him special skills and craftsmanship, creativity to build and construct the tabernacle. The Spirit of God filled him. And in Judges, the Spirit of God came upon judges, leaders of Israel. And when the Spirit of God came upon them, it gives them courage to fight the enemies, to fight the kings of the enemies. And for Samson, the famous judge of all, the son of Zorah, when the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson, it says that it gave him strength, special strength. So when the Spirit of God rests upon someone, something happened, something changed within that person. And that is what happened to David in what we just read today. He's not afraid when everyone else was afraid. He's not afraid what is going on. And we get a hint of it from our reading last week, because the Spirit of God rested upon David. So today we're going to talk about courage. We're going to talk about the issue of courage and the lack of courage, and what kind of courage that we are being taught in this passage. See, whether you realize it or not, to survive in this world, we need courage. We need courage if you need a chance to survive in this world. Regardless of which time you come from, actually, you need courage. From the day we are born into this world, from very young age, from middle, from kindy, you need courage. When I first send my kids one by one to school for the first day, they need courage to get into the room without their parents. Sometimes it's the parents need courage to let their kids in. Because I saw many parents are just clinging onto the door, can't let their kids go into school for the first time. We all need courage. And then as you grow up, become an adult, you need courage. Young people, you want to ask a girl out, you need courage. We need courage in this world. Whether you're a young person still studying or an old person in retirement, you need courage. Some of us are not living up to our capacity today, to our God-given calling, for this very reason, that we lack in courage. Some of us stuck in our comfort, whatever that comfort is, clinging on to that, and not living up to God's call in our life because we do not have courage. Because we like what we have right now, yet we forgot that God has a great calling and purpose in our life. And the reason we don't pursue that is because we lack in courage. And that's our text today. Today, from our text, we'll learn about the true courage that God gave us. So we're going to look at what is fake courage first, before we look at the true courage, and then finally, we're going to look at how to be courageous in God. All right? So what is fake courage? What is true courage? And how to be courageous? So the first one, fake courage. There is such a thing as fake courage or counterfeit courage. Fake courage comes from within. So you think you're courageous, but if it is fake, actually it comes from within. You stir yourself up to be courageous, to be bold from yourself, to prove to yourself or to prove to others, usually. Rather, you want to show yourself you can do this, that you are brave, that you're courageous. You stir your spirit up to be courageous, either to prove yourself, for yourself, or to others, either your parents, your boss, your teachers, your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whatever. That's fake courage. That is fake courage. Let's look at Goliath, who has this fake courage. Verse 4-7. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span, and he had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders, and the shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield bearer went before him. So what do we learn from here about Goliath? Goliath is a Philistine. He's the enemy of God. That's what we know. The enemy of God, the enemies of God's people. He's a big guy. All right. It says here that he's almost 2.5 meters in height. Have you met someone who's 2.5 meters tall? Well, Goliath is 2.5 meters tall, about 2.5 meters in height. He's strong. Well, in verse 5, it says that the weight of his coat is 55 kilogram. That's as much as my weight, I wish, but you know what I mean. It's heavy. He's fully equipped as well. He's fully equipped to inflict, his equipment is there to inflict serious damage to the enemy. It describes in detail his equipment. He has all the latest gadgets for war in those days. He has the latest gadgets. And also in verse 4 it says he is a champion of the Philistine. A champion here, the word really literally means someone who stands in between. So remember there on one side Israel, on another side, and then there's a valley. So a champion is someone who stand in between. So he's a champion of the Philistines. So that's who Goliath was. It seems that Goliath has everything on his side, right? He has the size, he has the armor, he has the advantage here. He challenged what he did, therefore, because of all that he has, right? It's from himself. That's why he's courageous. That's why this is called fake courage. Then he challenged and insulted the Israelites and the people of God. The word in ESV say defy, but it's actually mean insulted, look down the people of God. That's what he did, because he looked at himself. Look what I've got. Look at my size. Look at all these little crickets, the people of God here, the Israelites. Verse 10, and the Philistines said, I defy the ranks of Israel these days. Give me a man, he said, that we may fight together. When Saul and all the Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So Goliath has everything on his side. He has all the advantage, and he finds courage in that. Now, that is fake. That is not real, because if you have everything on your side, you do not need courage. If you have everything on your side, all going well for you, you need no courage. That is fake. If you say that's courage, that's fake, that's artificial, it's counterfeit. And Goliath, on Goliath's side, he manufactured that courage because of the evidence that he has. All the evidence, all the facts shows that he's on the winning side. He has all the advantage. The odd is with him. The odd is with him, right? It's just like our latest, this year's AFL Grand Final. People said there's no way, right? It's just so one-sided. The odd is against Sydney so greatly that, before even halftime, people already start, celebrating. And that's what happened here. Before they started fighting, they're already celebrating. That is fake courage. That's not courage. What is that? That is a safe bet. That is a safe bet. How do I know that? How do I know that is a fake courage? Well, because we have read Goliath was defeated. If that is a true courage, this wouldn't have happened. This is supposed to be a walk in the park, a piece of cake. But yet we read that he was defeated. Goliath was defeated. You see, just because you keep telling yourself, I can do this, it doesn't mean you can. The world is telling us if you can't do it, just tell yourself enough. Convince yourself enough. You can do it, then you can. I'm telling you, that's such a crap teaching. Since when? And if you have courage then to do it because you keep telling yourself you can do it, then that is a fake courage. That is counterfeit. That's not real. And that was Goliath's mistake, you see. As if there's special and secret thing, like when we tell ourselves, you can do it, you can, as if there's this special, magical or hidden thing inside of us that we can conjure up if we just keep telling ourselves, and we can tap into it. That is such a baloney. If you just believe in yourself enough, they say, you can do it. That's no way. That's no way. And that was Goliath's big, huge mistake, his fatal mistake. His fatal mistake is to say, I can do this. Look at what I've got. Look at all the high tech that I got, all this armor that I've got, all these gadgets, all this technology. I just need to press a button and then all the Israelites are going to be destroyed. Courage is not about telling yourself that you can do it. Okay? That's not courage. Courage is not something that you can try and convince yourself to be one. That's not courage. It's not about convincing yourself, telling yourself, as if there's this special thing inside of you. It's not. See, when everything goes well in your life, when you have everything that you need, all is under control, like Goliath, you need no courage. It's a safe bet as far as Goliath is concerned. Some of us say, See, for example, For me to eat the food that I like, I do not need courage, do I? But if you then presented me with grubs or exotic food like scorpions or whatever people eat these days, then I need courage. So like, I don't want to eat that. Then people dare me and say, go eat it. If I eat it, then I'm courageous in that moment. But if you present me with pork chop, I don't need courage to eat pork chop. And that's what happened there. We like to operate sometimes in a safe environment, in a safe bed. That's why I said some of us are stuck where we are, not living up to God's call in our life because we lack courage, because we like to operate in this safe bet, assured, guaranteed environment. When the result is not guaranteed, when the path is not paved for us, nicely paved for us, then we won't go for it. We say, God, show us everything clearly before we do anything. Then there is not courage. Or perhaps you are the absolutely opposite end, that you don't have anything going well in your life. Okay? Everything is not under control. You basically are lost. The odds are against your life. Everything going bad in your life. And you're afraid today on that particular thing. Whatever that thing in your life that you're afraid of, that you have no control of. Well, there is hope and there's good news, because that's what today's message is about. True courage. So what is true courage? True courage is not the absence of fear. Okay? We have seen that fake courage. Now true courage is not the absence of fear, but the presence of joy in the face of danger. That's what courage is. Courage is the presence of real joy in the face of danger. See, David, not Goliath, has courage. David has the true courage not because he's able like Goliath. Goliath able, has everything, but that is not true courage. David has the true courage not because he's able, not because he has everything, not because everything's going well for him. He's this little youth, not even adult yet, fighting this grown-up war person that is 2.5 meters tall, that has a coat of armor that weighed about 60 kilograms. David didn't tell himself when we go up and fight Goliath, David didn't tell himself, I can do this, come on David, you scared little David, I can do this. He didn't tell himself that. We'll read what he tell himself or tell the enemies. 19:23. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting the Philistines. And David rose early in the morning and left the sheep with the keeper and took the provisions and went, as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the encampment as the host was going out to the battle line, shouting the war cry. And Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. And David left the things in charge of the keeper of the baggage and ran to the ranks, so ran to the front line and went and greeted his brothers. As he talked with them, behold, the champion, the Philistine of God, Goliath by name, came out to the ranks out of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before. So he now insulted again that he had been the people of God. And David, this is important, and David heard him. David heard him. David heard Goliath insult, and he did not like it one bit. He said this, verse 26. Verse 26, this is amazing response. He said, for who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy or insult the armies of the living God? Who is this guy insulting my God? He's not saying that, David, you can do this. He said, no. He said, why? Who is this guy? Why is he even insulting God? Our God. How do you have courage? How do you make yourself brave? Some people say this. I sometimes teach my kids this in sports, okay? I said when especially for running, right? My elder son compete in school for running. I said, when you run, one of the best practice that athletes do is to visualize them finishing the line. As I said, you just need your music, sit down, you don't need to be out in the field. Yes, you need to do that as well to practice, but sometimes practice could happen in your mind. You visualize it. You visualize you are on the starting line. You are so focused. When the gun went off, you run as far as you can, as fast as you can to the finish line, and you finish first. You can visualize it, and athletes does this all the time. People say you can have courage by visualizing. So when you're afraid, picture. Psychologists do this all the time. Say, you're afraid of this? Okay, now this is a safe environment, right? This is in my office, in a safe environment. Just close your eyes and visualize that you are about to face your greatest nightmare. And then you slay your greatest nightmare. You destroy it. So that you practice that enough, and then when you go out there and meet your real greatest nightmare, you will be able to defeat it. Well, that doesn't work, let me tell you. Because Goliath died trying that. Right? Visualize yourself winning does not work in real life. You need practice still. You think Michael Jordan just visualized making shots? No. Did he visualize? Absolutely. But is that all he did? No. He go out and practice. And that's what David did, right? He said to Saul, I've been out in the field and fighting with the wild animals and the bears and the lions. I've done that many times. So courage is not visualizing yourself winning. In fact, true courage cares not about winning. True courage does not care about the outcome. David did not think about winning or care about it. All he cares is, who's this Philistine defying our God, insulting my God? Courage is not about, or cares not about, the outcome. Sometimes we think too much about the outcome, the results, and that has caused us to stuck in where we are, not stepping out, living out the call that God has in our life because we are too scared to move. Because we say, what the outcome going to be? It's going to be all right. It's going to be successful. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. What happened to my family if I do that? Courage is not about the outcome, not about winning. You see, in the story of Esther, when I read this, I was reminded by God about Esther. The story of Esther, Esther was faced with life and death decision to save the people. She was about to face the king. But because she wasn't called by the king and she has to face the king, she has to go into the court and meet the king. She's risking her life. Because that's against the law. The king could just kill her, execute her for coming into the king's presence without being called. So she was faced with that. If she approached the king, she may be killed. But if she didn't approach the king, her people will be killed. So that's her dilemma. The story tells us in the book of Esther that she decided to go and approach the king. And this is what Esther said. Esther has courage in that moment, and she cares not about the outcome. She cares not whether she's successful or not, whether she comes out alive or not, because that has nothing to do with courage. When she approached the king, this is what she said. If I perish, I perish. She basically said, if by doing this, by being courageous, living out what God calls me to do, and I die, let it be. For her, it is important to step out in faith, living out what God has called her, than to be in a safe place and be happy and successful. She cares not about success. She said, if by doing this I die, so be it. So be it. That's courage. Courage does not care about the outcome or about winning. So when we do something for the glory of God, we care not about the outcome. Esther didn't visualize success at that moment. In fact, she could be very fearful that she might be killed. She did it anyway. Why? Out of joy. Joy of knowing by doing this she could save her people not to be slaughtered. Some of us has been living in fear and stuck. It could be comfortable, could be successful by the world standard, but far cry from God has called us to live our life. Why? Because we are living in fear. We focus too much on success, on outcome, and on the results, not on obedience. We lack courage. Let me say this morning, leave the outcome to the Lord. Step out in faith, in courage, rather than focusing on, will this be successful? So visualization doesn't work. Esther didn't do that. She cares not. Obviously, David cares not if he's get killed as well. Perhaps you think different thing. Perhaps you think that you can be courageous if you have the right resources. Some people say, well, I'm not skilled enough. I don't have everything on my plate, on my side. Only if I have all this, perhaps I can do it. Somehow we say to ourselves, we need these things, whatever that may be. We need our degree, we need the people, we need the money, we need the resources before we can step out and live out God's call in our life. Perhaps that's you. You think, I need the resources before I can do that. Well, in our story, it is the Goliath, the Philistine, who has all the resources, not David. He has all the latest gadgets. Goliath, not David. Let's read from verse 38. Then Saul clothed David with his armor. So Saul tried to clothe David, the animal's keeper, with Saul's armor. And he put on a helmet of bronze on his head, on David's head, and clothed him with a coat of mail. And David stepped his sword over his armor, and he tried in vain to go. He cannot move in Saul's armor, because Saul is a big guy too, you see. The Bible says Saul is a big guy. Saul is a head taller than anyone else in Israel. Yet he was afraid of Goliath. And he tried in vain to go, for he had not tested them. Then David said to Saul, I cannot go with this, for I have not tested them. So David put them off. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in his shepherd's pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. I remember what one of my professors back in college tell me. When Saul put the armor on David, when David turned around, the armor stays. Didn't turn around with it because he's so big and so heavy, and David is so small. Doesn't work. It's not going to work. David said, I can't use this. It's not mine. See, sometimes we think like Goliath rather than like David. We need all the resources. We need our degree. We need our people. We need our money. We need everything before we step out in faith and be courageous. Goliath has all the gadgets. David has the opposite. For David to go up against Goliath is to go out with a staff, a stick, and a slingshot, and 5 stones. It's like, in today's world, it's like a tiny, poor country that has no military technology fighting, go up against the superpower that has nuclear weapon, that has the jets, that has everything. True courage has nothing to do with resources that you have or that you have not. See, everyone, that means everyone in every stage of your life can be courageous. Whether you have the degree or you don't, whether you have the job or you don't, whether you have the money or you don't, whether you have the marriage or you don't, whether you have all the children or you don't, it does not matter. At every stage of your life, you can be courageous because resources does not determine courage. So courage is not about having the right resources, but about resting in the assurance that in spite of our limitation, God will prevail. So what does this mean for us? It means when you feel that you are lacking, under-resourced, under-skilled, under-trained, overwhelmed, you can always trust God that He will prevail. So finally, how to be courageous. So we look at what is fake courage, counterfeit courage, what is true courage in David, and how to be courageous. Well, courageous is not the absence of fear, I say that. If you're not afraid, then it's not courage. But I want to say that courage is this. It's about doing the right thing even when you're afraid. Courage is about doing the right thing even when you're afraid. If God's called you to do something that is right, and you know it's right, courage is to do it out of joy, not out of fear. You may be afraid still, but you do it anyway. And courage is not about the outcome. It's not about winning. Sometimes we think courage is about winning because we look at the story of Goliath and David won. And it's always focused on the outcome, on the results. No, courage is not about winning. It's about doing the right thing, even at the risk of losing everything, including your life. Is that courage? Absolutely. Is that a failure? Perhaps in the eyes of people, in the eyes of your parents, your spouse. Even people close to you may see that as a failure. But you know, when you step out for God, even when the result did not turn out as people expected or what people count as successful, that is courageous, that is success in the eyes of God. So even at the risk of losing everything, even your own life, there is courage. And we look at the history of Christianity since Jesus died and rose again. All those great men and women of God, we see a lot of them died for being courageous. From human perspective, they have failed. Yet from in the scheme of redemptive history, from the view of eternity, they have been successful in the eyes of God. So our timeline is not 5 years, our timeline is not 80 years, it's not 100 years of our life. Our timeline is eternity. Sometime when you look at in the timeline of 5 years or 80 years, that could be a fail. But God sees your effort and what you do in the scheme of eternity. And if you step out in courage, with God, when God sees that, that is a success. So, however, the message isn't about Goliath, as I said before, being our greatest fear, and we must be like David to defeat our greatest fear. So, be courageous like David. That's not our message. Okay? That's not our message. David isn't the example hero we are to follow. That's not what the story about. If you think the story is about David is hero, he's our example, we must follow David, we miss the point. We are the Saul and the people of Israel in this story. Do you see that? We are the fearful Saul and the fearful people of Israel in this story. We are not David. You see, let me explain, and then I'm going to close. This is my last point. Let's look at verse 8 and 9. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel. This is Goliath. Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Telling the people of God, the Israelites, am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourself, and let him come down to me. If he's able to fight with me and kill me, we, the Philistines, will be your servants. But if I, Goliath, prevail against you, or him, this person, and kill him, then all of you shall be our servants and serve us. What's happening here? Not everyone was fighting. Do you see that? It's one-on-one battle, but who benefits? The entire nation benefit. If Goliath won, only him fighting, the Philistine will benefit. The people of God, the Israelites, are supposed to be servants to serve. And if David wins, only David fight. If David wins, then the entire Philistine, the whole nations, will serve Israel. Do you see that? So only one person fight, the rest benefit or suffer if you lose. When we understand this, right? David is there to represent Israel and Goliath is there to represent Philistines. When we understand this, we will understand that we are not called to be like David, to fight our own giants in our life, our own fear or depression or whatever that is, but we are like the rest of the Israelites, and so we are there to receive the victory through David. David, our champion, David fought for us. We are the Israelites, we are the fearful Israelites. David fought for us. When David won, we won. Do you see that? When David won, we won. So in the history of redemption, God sent to us the ultimate David to fight for us. And his name is Jesus. And that's why we look at David. Last week we say, when you look at Jesus, it says Jesus is the son of David. Again and again, they refer him as the son of David. And God sent the ultimate David, the son of David, to us. His name is Jesus. Jesus defeated his Goliath death on the cross. And Jesus' victory over Goliath means of victory as well. So Jesus did not have the victory over death and tell us, now you do likewise. When David fought Goliath and defeated Goliath, David didn't tell the rest of Israel, now you do likewise. He said, no, I've won. By defeating Goliath, I've won. Jesus, by defeating death on the cross, Jesus has won. And because Jesus has won, we have the victory. We have won. See, our salvation as Christians are not by example. Do you see that? Our salvation is not by example or to follow Jesus. If we follow every steps of what Jesus did, then we have our salvation. It's not. The Bible says our salvation is by imputation, given to us by representation. Because Jesus won, we've won. Because David won, the people of God won. Jesus was courageous, the Bible tells us, facing the most excruciating death. He knows it's coming. He was courageous, but not without fear. The Bible tells us he was just as afraid. In the Garden of Gethsemane, remember? He prayed to the Father. He said, Father, if you could just take this away from me. And was sweating like blood, the Bible says. He was scared. He knows he's about to be crucified. Yet he followed through. He said, Father, it's not my will, your will. I'm going to go through this. Even though I'm afraid, I'm going to go through this. And that's courage. Jesus faced his fear and be courageous. How can he do that? He did it because he has joy for you and for me. Because he has love for you and for me. And that's what gives him courage. Not in the absence of fear, but in the presence of joy, knowing that by going through this, he will reconcile us. He will have us back. So he was courageous to face the cross because of his love. And this is also then the key for us, for you and me. If today you are afraid and not courageous and we're not stepping out in faith and trust God, because we don't have the resources or whatever reasoning that we tell ourselves. Remember this. See Jesus' victory on the cross, not as an example, but as a guarantee of our victory. Jesus' victory means we have won. And in spite of Jesus' fear, he came through anyway because of you and me. So when you step out in faith, following what God has called you in life, will you be afraid? Absolutely. Some people say, how do you know this is God's will for me? Just pray if you have peace in your heart. As if when you have peace and no more fear in your life, you just go through it. There's no such thing in the Bible. That's not biblical. That's not biblical. A lot of people, men and women of God, follow through what God has called them. And they go through it in the midst of fear, trembling, scared to death. Yet they're going through it, and that's courage. And for us, it's so much easier because we know Jesus is not our example. He is our champion. Because Jesus has won, we won. Let's close our eyes.